President Trump is usually wrong, in my opinion, on a great deal of policy. But once in a while, albeit likely for the wrong reasons, he's also actually right. Case in point, Syria. Specifically, American involvement in Syria. Now, it's been reported that President Trump wants to pull our forces immediately out of the country of Syria. And to that I say, absolutely wonderful. I couldn't agree more. Let's get him out. Let's get him home. Why are we in this? Why are we in this country? In fact, look, we're actually doing more harm than good by being there. In fact, our weapons have been found on ISIS fighters. How do our weapons that we give to the Syrian rebels end up in the hands of ISIS? That's probably because Syrian rebels are, look, we don't know who they are, for one, and more likely they're terror groups, or they have links to terror groups, at least some of them, right? So, look, that's disastrous, right? Another reason is that the civilian death toll is absolutely disastrous. I mean, look, we can't just keep getting involved in the Middle East. Not because I don't care about the people there. I do care about the people. But maybe instead of dropping bombs, we could drop humanitarian aid and maybe take in Syrian refugees. That's actually a much better use of our resources than sending guns, troops, and bombs that end up in the hands of ISIS. But anyway, that said, look, when President Trump is right on a policy position, it's usually because he's doing it for the wrong reasons. Now, this is according to CNN. In a sometimes tense meeting of his national security team, Trump complained at length about the amount of American money being spent in the region, which he said has produced nothing for the U.S. in return. And he continued to question why other countries in the region, particularly the wealthy Gulf nations, haven't stepped in. Now, look, you could say, look, I agree with the money. Yeah, we are wasting money, and that's true. I will agree with that. And look, I'm actually more concerned, however, about the civilian deaths that our involvement is causing in the war. So that's my chief concern. And President Trump's chief concern is, oh, we're spending too much and we can't spend taxpayer money on this war. And again, I do agree with that, but that's not my chief concern. What we've been doing there when it comes to civilian deaths is we've been causing quite a bit. According to The Guardian, U.S.-led coalition strikes since 2014 in Syria have led to at least 800 civilian deaths. Now, that's a very, very conservative estimate. There are other groups on the ground that are monitoring this that have produced estimates of civilian deaths that go as high as 6,000 innocent civilians. So, yes, that right there, that is the terrible cost of war. Why are we involved when all we're doing is basically just causing more civilian deaths and more war? Now, going back to CNN, despite this, his disagreements with some of his staff and some of his generals and advisors, Trump has actually agreed to hold off on immediately pulling troops from the country. Well, that's interesting. Well, I have an answer to why this is happening. His advisors, as I mentioned before, represent defense contractors in the military-industrial complex. So they're saying, no, don't pull out now. Now, one of them is, of course, CIA Director Mike Pompeo, or incoming CIA Director. He's told Trump that an immediate withdrawal from Syria would be a terrible mistake. Oh, absolutely terrible. Really? Well, that's interesting. Funny how he'd say that. Because, again, Mike Pompeo is a war hawk. He loves war. So, of course he wants to stay. Yes, we need to stay there. We need to bomb more. No, we don't. I definitely disagree with that. Because, again, we're not doing any good. We're just bombing civilians. Now they continue. Military officials have also presented an almost unanimous view that withdrawing U.S. troops from Syria would be a mistake. So he's got the entire military-industrial complex that is urging him, no, you need to stay, you need to stay. You need to stay and bomb more so our donors can make more money. Because that's what it's all about. In fact, during the meeting with his National Security Council at the White House, Trump was told by top advisors such as General Joseph Dunford The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff that leaving Syria now would provide, oh, you're going to love this, it would provide an opening for Russia, Turkey, and Iran to advance their own interests in the country, which run counter to the United States. Oh, and you're going to love now Fox News' reaction to this. And conservative reactions. Oh, the Russia, we're going to empower Russia. Oh, really? Now you're concerned about Russia. Interesting. But I'll get to that. But here's the thing, right? You got to understand that this was never about protecting the Syrian people. It's never about doing the right things. No. This is about international politics. It always has been. And our country's interests. Yes, of course, we go to war for our own interests. And look, recently, we've gone to war for our own economic interests, basically to enrich multinational corporations. Let me give you an example here. In Syria, we're talking about oil and gas pipelines, right? Now, look, if we cede that area, if we pull out, and Assad, of course, wins this war, then guess what? He's going to sign oil and gas leases with Russia. So, oh, look at that. They're going to go in, Russian natural gas is now going to compete with American natural gas interests on the world market. Oh, can't have that. Can't have that. That's what this is about. Now, the president, interestingly enough, he's still holding on to this. Even though he's put a little bit of a delay in, he still drew a little bit of a line. In fact, responding to a question asked by Dunford about what he wants to see in Syria, the president responded by saying that U.S. troops need to finish their mission in against ISIS in Syria within the next 6 months. A timeline military officials, including Defense Secretary James Mattis, warned would be too short. All right, fine. But we're not going to pull them out now. We're going to wait 6 months. Finish off ISIS, and then we're going to go. Well, the problem with that is ISIS or whatever, or say you finish off ISIS, this is going to be a worse group as long as we hang around in the area. So, and look, all ISIS has to do is just wait for 6 months and then just be like, okay, now the Americans are leaving. And in fact, that's a conservative argument, by the way. Oh, yeah, ISIS could just wait us out and then just come back. So we have to stay there indefinitely. Or maybe we shouldn't go to those places in the first place, because the only reason that ISIS exists is not because Americans went into Iraq and then pulled out. It's because we went into Iraq in the first place. And that is the big problem here, right? Now, look, I understand that the situation in Syria is incredibly complicated. There's a lot of different sides here, right? For example, you've got Turkey now attacking our allies in the Peshmerga. That is the Kurdish militia, right? They actually won a lot of victories against ISIS. There was a great ally in the region. What are we going to do in that situation? Again, this is incredibly complicated. So that's another reason that we shouldn't completely get involved in these wars. Because how are we supposed to respond to that? I mean, Turkey was also one of our allies in the region. And so, and before Erdogan, they were actually one of the biggest secular democracies. Now they're no longer secular, thanks to, as I said, Erdogan. But again, if we intervene on behalf of either one of those sides, we're going to end up having some issues. So, man, this is what happens when you start getting involved in wars and conflicts that we have no business in getting ourselves involved in. Now, unfortunately, our defense contractors want us to get involved because then that makes money, right? And in Syria, the defense contractors obviously want to stay, just like they wanted to stay in Iraq. And why? It's because, look, they make endless money off endless conflict. And the danger that I see here is President Trump being influenced by these people because at the end of the day, he's not very smart. And look, Trump, I believe he's actually right on this. We got to get out of the Middle East. We got to get out of Syria, right? Look, President Trump, to his credit, he even ran on how going into Iraq in the first place was absolutely stupid and we shouldn't have done it. Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that. Now, unfortunately, I think I'm afraid he's going to change his mind based on some of these advisors and even Fox News, for example. In fact, I'm going to show you a video recently of Fox News' reaction to him pulling out of Syria. Let's watch.
Yeah, we saw what happened in Syria.
Of course. I mean, so from the president's perspective, he's saying we got the border crisis. We have plenty of problems here at home. I don't want to be nation building anymore. The Sunnis should be stepping up. This is a mess someone else created. At the same time, though, if you pull out of Syria too quickly, you create a vacuum. ISIS, the caliphate, has been defeated, but they've all fled into Turkey, Islamist Turkey, and they're still involved. You've got the Kurdish allies still not ready to stand up by themselves. And you've got Iran wanting to take over that entire vacuum and build a land bridge to our friends in Israel.
And what about Russia, too? Because Russia and Syria.
As well.
Yeah, I think the president's too smart. He knows what happened when President Obama took his troops out of Iraq. He said, I didn't want the Iraq war, but man, it was a dumb move for him to do that. Look, it created ISIS. And the President Obama mocked, said they're the JV team, and they turned out to be more lethal than al-Qaeda.
With your experience, General Mattis, General John Kelly serve on his cabinet. What would their advice be to the president?
Well, I mean, he's hearing from a lot of different voices, all of which experienced the Iraq war. What happened there when Obama, as Brian said, pulled out too quickly. What you don't want is an Obama 2.0 scenario here where you've declared the end of the caliphate, so you pull all the troops out. The folks there that are supposed to keep the peace are not ready yet, and so the more active actors in Iran and Russia set the initiative and they take over, and now you've got a whole nother powder keg.
Listen.
Russia. I mean, Russia's going to take over. And by the way, President Trump, you don't want to be President Obama 2.0. You can't pull out. You can't pull out. Don't pull out. Don't pull out. If Donald Trump listens to Fox News, and yes, we have documented proof that he takes policy position from Fox News, and look, the person that was talking about that, Pete Hegseth, you think that's a coincidence? No, Hegseth is one of the people that Donald Trump listens to. In fact, he was in the running to replace. Now I cannot. Now I'm blanking out of the name, but David Shokin running the VA. So yes, he listens to this guy, and so if Trump does listen to him on this advice, then we're never going to leave. We're never going to leave, because no matter what, they're going to make the same argument. Like, oh, I'm sorry, we can't pull out. If we pull out, we're going to create a vacuum. We're going to create a vacuum, and we're going to get more terrorism. But if we stay, the terrorism also never ends. It never ends, because we're giving them an enemy to fight against. So, and if you think that they don't already know that, then you are absolutely wrong. They know that, but they don't care, because guess what? Endless war brings certain people endless profits, and that is what this is always been about. Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you want to see more like this, please hit the subscribe button below. And if you want to support truly independent progressive media, please consider becoming a patron at patreon.com/TYTNation.